The text message arrived at exactly 8:17 a.m. I remember because I was pouring coffee into the same blue ceramic mug I'd used every morning for almost 3 years. The handle had a tiny crack running through it. Ellen used to tell me to throw it away. "It still holds coffee," I'd always answer. She'd laugh. "So do old people." I smiled every time I remembered that. The phone buzzed once. I wiped my hands on a dish towel before picking it up. It was from my daughter, Rachel. "Dad, we've had to make some changes because of space. We're keeping the baby shower very small now. I hope you understand. We'll celebrate another time." I read it twice. Then a third time. The invitation had been sitting on my refrigerator for 3 weeks. Now I wasn't invited anymore. I looked at the date. Saturday. 3 days away. I typed one sentence. "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." Then I put the phone face down beside my coffee. I didn't call, didn't argue, didn't ask why. Some questions answer themselves. Outside, my old 2008 Ford Ranger sat in the driveway with faded paint and nearly 240,000 miles on the odometer. The driver's seat had a tear Ellen had sewn twice before finally giving up. Most people saw an old truck. That was fine. Most people also saw an old widower living alone in a modest 2-bedroom house with peeling white paint and a squeaky front gate. That was fine too. Very few people knew I had retired 7 years earlier, after selling the engineering company I'd started in a rented warehouse with 1 drafting table and 2 borrowed toolboxes. Even fewer knew that company now designed structural systems for airports, bridges, and hospitals across 4 continents. After taxes, employee ownership payouts, and every promise I'd made to the people who helped build it, I never worried about money again. Not once. But Ellen never let wealth become part of our identity. She used to fold laundry and say the same sentence every Sunday afternoon. "Let people believe you have nothing. The honest ones won't care. The dishonest ones will tell you exactly who they are." At the time, I thought she was simply talking about humility. Years later, I realized she was talking about protection. So after selling the company, I kept driving the Ranger. I kept mowing my own lawn. I still clipped coupons because Ellen enjoyed finding them. Old habits carry memories. Some things become sacred simply because someone you loved touched them often enough. Rachel knew I'd sold the business. She just never knew how much. She never asked. Neither did I volunteer the number. Money changes conversations. Sometimes it changes children. Not because they're greedy, because people begin imagining futures that haven't happened yet. Ellen hated that. "Never make someone guess what they're owed," she'd say. "They'll eventually believe they earned it." Rachel was our only child. She had been born after 11 years of trying. Doctors had gently suggested we stop hoping. Then one rainy Tuesday in October, hope ignored them. She arrived weighing 6 pounds and 9 ounces. Ellen cried. I forgot every speech I'd prepared. Rachel wrapped one tiny hand around my finger. I was finished. There wasn't anything I wouldn't have done for that little girl. She grew into the kind of child who apologized when someone else bumped into her. The kind who brought home stray animals. The kind who called every Sunday after college just to ask how her mother was doing. When Ellen became sick, Rachel practically moved into our house. She slept on the couch for weeks. She helped with medications. She cooked. She cleaned. She held her mother's hand during the long afternoons when treatment made conversation impossible. I never forgot that. Never. After Ellen passed away, something changed. Not all at once. Little things. The kind you could explain away if you wanted to. Rachel married Daniel 18 months later. Nice enough young man. Marketing consultant. Always dressed well. Always speaking like every conversation was halfway through a business meeting. He called me Mr. Bennett for almost 2 years before Rachel finally corrected him. He's your father now. Daniel smiled. Right. Sorry, Dad. It sounded practiced. Not natural. I ignored it. Families take time. Or so I believed. Then came Linda, Daniel's mother. She had opinions about everything, especially appearances. The first Thanksgiving after the wedding, she watched me arrive in the Ranger. She smiled politely. You know, she said, Used cars are so expensive now, sometimes financing something newer actually saves money. I like this truck. It has character. So do I. She laughed. I wasn't joking. At Christmas, she handed everyone expensive gifts. Designer scarves, smart watches, restaurant gift cards. Mine was a hardware store calendar. Rachel looked embarrassed. Linda smiled. I remembered how much you enjoy fixing things. I do. She looked relieved I'd accepted it. The truth? I actually used every page. It was a fine calendar. Ellen would have approved. Small slights only become wounds if you insist they were intended that way. So I didn't. Life stayed peaceful. Mostly. Months later, Daniel mentioned they were looking for a larger home before starting a family. The market's impossible. It is. If only we'd bought 5 years earlier. I nodded. Silence stretched. He looked at me, then away, then back. I recognized that look. Someone hoping you'll volunteer something. Money, advice, an offer. I simply asked if he'd talk to a mortgage broker. His shoulders dropped just slightly. No. You should. That was the end of it. Or so I thought. The baby news came the following spring. Rachel called crying. Happy tears. Dad, you're going to be grandpa. I sat down immediately. Not because I was old. Because joy can make your knees weak. I walked into the garage after hanging up. Ellen's gardening gloves still hung from a nail beside the door. I picked one up. You're going to be grandma, I whispered. For the first time since losing her, the house felt full again. I built a crib by hand. Maple wood. No nails visible. Every corner sanded smooth enough that my fingers couldn't find an edge. It took 3 weekends. I enjoyed every minute. Rachel cried when she saw the pictures. Dad, Mom would have loved it. I know. I made one mistake. What? I should have started sooner. She laughed. For a moment, everything felt normal again. Then the visits became less frequent. Always busy. Always another commitment. Daniel had work. Linda had planned brunch. Someone else had tickets. Someone else had reservations. I understood. Young couples build their own lives. That's healthy. Still, sometimes weeks passed without hearing from Rachel. Whenever I called, she sounded rushed. Dad, can I call later? Of course. Later usually became tomorrow. Tomorrow is next week. Life does that. Until one afternoon I stopped by with fresh tomatoes from my garden. Rachel wasn't home. Daniel answered. Oh, he looked surprised. I was nearby. I brought vegetables. He accepted the bag. Thanks. I waited. He stayed inside. Finally, I smiled. Tell Rachel I stopped by. I will. The door closed gently, not rudely, just completely. Driving home, I remembered something Ellen once told me after Rachel left for college. One day she'll stop needing us. I nodded. That's success. She looked out the kitchen window. But I hope she never stops wanting us. Those were different things. I didn't understand then. I did it now. 2 weeks before the baby shower, Rachel asked if I could drop off the handmade crib. Daniel was working late. She couldn't lift it. I loaded every piece carefully into the Ranger. The nursery looked beautiful. Soft green walls, white curtains, tiny stuffed animals lined perfectly on floating shelves. Rachel hugged me. Longer than usual. Thank you. You built this yourself? I had good teachers. She smiled. Mom? Always. She ran her hand across the smooth wood. I miss her. So do I. Then Linda arrived. She walked through the front door carrying 3 shopping bags. She stopped when she saw me. Oh, you're still here. Rachel looked uncomfortable. Dad just finished assembling the crib. Linda inspected it. It's charming. She pressed one corner with her thumb. Although these custom things don't always meet modern safety standards. They do. You checked? I built hospitals for 38 years. She blinked. I mean, I know measurements. She laughed lightly. I wasn't criticizing. I know. Silence settled over the room. Then she turned to Rachel. The florist called. They need the final guest count. Rachel glanced at me, then away. Something flickered across her face, gone almost instantly. I noticed. Parents notice. Even when children think they don't. 3 days later, the message arrived. 8:17 a.m. Removed from the guest list. No explanation beyond space. I accepted it. At least on the surface. That afternoon I drove to my favorite diner just outside town. Helen, the waitress, had worked there nearly as long as I'd been retired. The usual? You remember? You tip too well. I tip fairly. She refilled my coffee before I asked. 2.89, she said, setting the receipt beside the mug. Same price for years. Same booth. Same cracked blue mug waiting back home. Routine has a strange way of keeping lonely people steady. I was halfway through my sandwich when the front door chimed. An older woman walked in wearing a navy blazer and carrying an expensive leather handbag. She looked around the room, then directly at me. For a second, she frowned, not with confusion, with recognition. She walked over slowly. Excuse me. Yes? She studied my face another moment. I have an unusual question. Go ahead. Your last name? I nodded. Bennett. She smiled. I thought so. It's been almost 25 years. I'm Margaret Ashcroft. The Ashcroft Foundation. I stood immediately. Now I remembered. Her husband and I had spent nearly 2 years designing earthquake-resistant housing for children's hospitals after a devastating quake overseas. He'd been one of the finest men I'd ever worked with. Margaret reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. I heard Richard passed. So did Ellen. Her smile softened. I'm sorry. So am I. She looked around the diner, then back at me. I had no idea you still lived here. I never left. And you're really eating lunch at Miller's? I like pie. She laughed. Richard would have loved that. We talked for nearly 40 minutes. Old projects, old friends, people we'd buried, people we'd forgotten. Finally, she asked a simple question. So how's the family? I smiled. My daughter is expecting. Wonderful. Baby shower this weekend. That must be exciting. I looked down at my coffee. It probably will be. She watched me carefully. Then asked the question no one else had. You're saying that like you won't be there. I didn't answer. I simply folded Rachel's text message back into my pocket. Margaret noticed. She didn't ask again. Instead, she quietly said 5 words that changed everything. I think something is wrong. I wasn't sure yet. But for the first time, I wondered if being uninvited wasn't the whole story. Maybe it was only the first thing I'd been allowed to notice. Margaret didn't push. She had always been that way. When we'd worked together decades earlier, she had a habit of letting silence do the work that questions couldn't. Helen walked over with the coffee pot. Another refill? Margaret smiled. Please. Helen poured. Then she looked at me. You okay, Frank? I've had better mornings. You've also had worse. I have. She patted my shoulder and walked away. Margaret watched the exchange. You come here often? Every Tuesday? And everyone knows you. I suppose. She folded her hands. So, would you tell me what happened? I slid my phone across the table. She read Rachel's message once, then again. When she finished, she didn't react the way most people would have. She didn't call Rachel ungrateful. She didn't criticize Daniel. She didn't tell me to confront anyone. Instead, she asked one question. Has this happened before? I don't know. She tilted her head. That's not what I asked. I leaned back. No. I think smaller versions have. What kind? I thought about it. Christmas. Birthdays. Last-minute schedule changes. Forgotten invitations. Conversations that ended early. Meals where I somehow always sat at the edge of the table. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone could point to. Just distance. Margaret nodded slowly. Patterns hide inside small things. That sentence stayed with me, because it felt true, not only about families, about engineering, about business, about life. Tiny cracks become collapsed bridges when everyone decides they're too small to matter. When we stood to leave, Margaret reached into her purse. She handed me a business card. It wasn't for the foundation. It had another name beneath it. Ashcroft Family Office. If you ever need another pair of eyes, she paused. I've spent 30 years helping families untangle misunderstandings. I'm not looking for lawyers. I didn't say lawyers. What are you saying? I'm saying grief changes families. So does money. I looked at her. She continued. Sometimes people don't even realize they're changing. Then she smiled. Call me if your instincts keep bothering you. That evening I walked through my house more slowly than usual. Not because anything had changed. Because suddenly I was looking differently. Ellen's rocking chair, still beside the fireplace. Her recipe box, still on the kitchen counter. The old cedar chest at the foot of our bed, untouched. I opened it. Her quilt rested on top. Beneath it was the notebook she had kept during the last year of her illness. I hadn't opened it in months, maybe longer. I turned to a random page. Her handwriting leaned slightly to the right. Neat. Patient. One sentence caught my eye. Love isn't measured by invitations. It's measured by whether people make room for you when life gets crowded. I closed the notebook. She always knew. Sometimes years before anyone else. The following morning my phone rang. Rachel. I answered on the second ring. Morning. Hi, Dad. Her voice sounded careful, not cheerful. You got my text. I did. You aren't upset? No. You understand? I understand what you told me. Silence. She waited, as though expecting more. I didn't offer it. Finally she spoke. I didn't want you thinking. She stopped. Thinking what? I don't know. Neither do I. Another pause. Then she hurried. I have another appointment. I have to go. Take care of yourself. You too. She hung up. The call lasted 1 minute. 38 seconds. I stared at the phone. She'd never actually said she wanted me gone. Only that space was limited. There was a difference. A small one, but important. On Thursday afternoon, I received another call. This one surprised me. Frank, this is Robert Ellis. I smiled immediately. Bob had been my attorney for almost 40 years. Retired now. Mostly, you're still alive? Barely. You? According to my doctor. He laughed. I'll be nearby tomorrow. Coffee? Always. We met at a small cafe overlooking the river. Bob still wore suspenders. Still carried yellow legal pads instead of tablets. Still refused to own a smartwatch. After 20 minutes of catching up, he looked over his glasses. You didn't ask me here for nostalgia. I didn't. So, my daughter uninvited me from her baby shower. He nodded once. And? I can't tell if I'm imagining something. You usually don't. I hope I am. He stirred his coffee. Tell me everything. So I did. Not only about the message, about the last 3 years. Every small moment, every awkward dinner, every strange silence, every tiny cut that seemed too insignificant to mention on its own. When I finished, Bob didn't speak for almost a full minute. Finally he said, "Have you changed your estate plan?" I blinked. What? My question stands. No. When was the last update? The year Ellen died. So, 4 years. Yes. He made a note. Does anyone know approximately what you're worth? I've never discussed numbers. Approximately. I assume Rachel knows I sold the company. And Daniel? I don't know. Linda? I honestly couldn't tell you. Bob tapped his pen. Has anyone ever asked? Not directly. He looked up. They won't. Why? Because polite people don't ask. And impolite people don't need to. What does that mean? It means people often build stories from scraps. He leaned back. You drive an old truck. Yes. You wear a 15-year-old coat. I like the coat. You mow your own lawn. I enjoy it. You never mention investments. No. They've probably invented a financial picture for you. I frowned. You think they believe I'm broke? I think they've filled in blanks. And once people believe a story, he shrugged. They stop looking for evidence. I thought about Linda's comments. The truck, the calendar, the constant advice about saving money. Maybe they genuinely believed I had very little. But if that were true, why exclude me? That still didn't fit. Bob seemed to read my thoughts. This isn't about inheritance. This isn't about inheritance. You don't think? I think it's about influence. He folded his hands. Tell me, who's organizing the shower? Linda. Who made the guest list? I assume Linda and Rachel. Who sent the message? Rachel. There. He let that single word sit between us. Where? The decision and the messenger aren't necessarily the same person. Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about that. The decision, the messenger. Had Rachel wanted me there? Or had she simply been caught between two families? I honestly didn't know. And that realization hurt more than the text itself, because I had always known my daughter, or at least, I thought I had. Saturday morning arrived, the day of the shower. I woke up at 6, out of habit. For a brief second I forgot. Then I remembered. The house felt unusually quiet. I made coffee, used the blue mug, sat on the porch. At 10:15 I loaded a small wrapped package into the truck anyway. Not the crib. That had already been delivered. This was something else. A tiny silver music box, handmade. Inside the lid I'd engraved 6 words. Love always leaves the light on. It had been Ellen's favorite saying. I drove across town, not to the shower, to a shipping store. I mailed it. No note, no explanation, just the gift. As I was walking back to the Ranger, someone called my name. Mr. Bennett? I turned. A young woman hurried toward me, late 20s, dark hair, holding a balloon. I recognized her after a second. Emily, Rachel's college roommate. I almost didn't recognize you. I've gotten older. You've gotten, she smiled, more distinguished. I'll take that. She looked confused. Aren't you heading to the shower? I'm not invited. Her smile disappeared. What? I'm sure Rachel explained. No. She told us you were out of town. The world became very still. I'm sorry. What did you say? Emily frowned. She said you had a business conference. I looked at her. She looked back. Neither of us spoke. Finally she whispered, She really didn't tell you? I shook my head once, slowly. No. Emily looked genuinely distressed. I shouldn't have said anything. You only answered my question. I thought. She stopped. I have to go. She hurried away before I could ask another. I stood in the parking lot for a long time. Business conference. Rachel had lied. Not only to me, to everyone else. But why? That afternoon I called Margaret. She answered immediately. I was wondering when you'd call. I learned something. What? I told her. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she spoke softly. Now we know there are 2 stories. What do you mean? The one your daughter told you, and the one she told everyone else. I closed my eyes. I don't understand. No, you don't. But someone does. I took a slow breath. What should I do? Her answer came without hesitation. Nothing. Nothing? For now. I can't just ignore this. I'm not asking you to ignore it. She spoke with quiet certainty. I'm asking you to observe. Silence settled between us. Then she said the sentence that would guide everything that followed. Frank. Yes? Let them believe they've already explained everything. Why? Because people stop protecting a lie once they think everyone believes it. I looked out my kitchen window, across the yard, toward Ellen's old rose bushes. Margaret continued. That's when the truth starts introducing itself. For the first time since that text message arrived, I stopped thinking about confrontation and started thinking about patience. Because patience had built bridges. Patience had built companies. Maybe it could also uncover what had happened to my family. I just had to wait long enough for someone to forget I was watching. The Monday after the shower, I went back to my routine. That wasn't an act. Routine had carried me through Ellen's illness, through her funeral, through the first Christmas without her. It could carry me through this too. At 7:30, I watered the tomatoes. At 8, I drove the Ranger to Miller's Diner. Helen had my coffee waiting before I sat down. 2.89, she said with a grin. I know. You look better. I slept. Good. She topped off the mug. Whatever's bothering you, she shrugged. Don't let it make you someone else. I won't. I know. Simple advice. Sometimes that's the only kind worth keeping. Rachel called Wednesday evening. Hi, Dad. Hi. Did you get the gift? The music box? Yes. I did. Thank you. Your mother picked it. There was a soft laugh. She would have. For a moment we sounded like ourselves again. Then the silence returned. Finally Rachel spoke. I wish you could have been there. I almost asked why I hadn't been. Almost. Instead I said, I hope everyone had a nice time. They did. Good. Another pause. Then she asked something unexpected. Are you busy this Friday? I don't think so. Could you come by? Of course. I want to show you something. I'll be there. She sounded relieved. When we hung up, I noticed something. She had invited me. Not because of a holiday. Not because she needed furniture assembled. Simply because she wanted me to come. Or at least, that's what I hoped. Friday afternoon, I drove over with a basket of peaches from the farmer's market. Daniel answered the door. Hey, afternoon. He stepped aside. Rachel was in the nursery folding tiny baby clothes. The crib looked exactly where we'd left it. Seeing it occupied by little blankets and stuffed animals made me smile. It looks good. You did good work. I had excellent motivation. She smiled back. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then the doorbell rang. Linda. She walked in carrying fabric samples. Oh, I didn't know Frank was here. I'm leaving soon. No rush. She smiled politely. Then she spread the samples across the dining table. I've narrowed the curtains down to these 3. Rachel looked overwhelmed. They all look nice. They're completely different. They're all white. Different shades of white. I quietly walked into the kitchen. Some conversations don't need another opinion. As I washed my hands, their voices drifted in. You need to decide. I know. The nursery should look perfect. I know. People notice details. I know. 3 identical answers. Each a little quieter. I remembered hearing Rachel answer her mother that way when she was 12. Only then, it had been about piano lessons. Now it was curtains. Pressure changes shape. It rarely changes its voice. Daniel joined me in the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator. You want something? I'm fine. He grabbed a bottle of water, then leaned against the counter. You know, he hesitated. I appreciate the crib. I'm glad. It probably saved us. He stopped. Saved you what? Nothing. He laughed awkwardly. I was just thinking out loud. I waited. He took another drink. Everything's expensive. It is. The baby's already costing more than we expected. I imagine. He looked at me, almost as if expecting me to finish the sentence for him. I didn't. Instead, I asked, How's work? He sighed. Busy. That answer came much more naturally. As I prepared to leave, Rachel walked me to the truck. She hugged me. Longer than usual. Dad. Yes? I'm sorry things have been. She searched for the word. Different. I looked at her. They have. I don't always know how to balance everyone. I know. I never wanted you to feel left out. I appreciate you saying that. She looked relieved. Then Linda opened the front door. Rachel, we need you. I'm coming. Rachel squeezed my hand once. I'll call this weekend. I'll answer. She smiled. Then she disappeared inside. I drove away wondering why a 32-year-old woman looked like a teenager asking permission. Saturday morning, Bob called. Are you busy? Not especially. I found something. What? Come by. Bob's office occupied the first floor of an old brick building downtown. Retired or not, he still kept regular hours. Mostly because, as he liked to say, his wife was tired of him reorganizing the garage. When I arrived, he had several folders open across his desk. What am I looking at? Nothing dramatic. That's reassuring. He smiled. I've been thinking. Dangerous. It is. He slid a yellow pad toward me. I wrote down every interaction you described. I frowned. You made a timeline? I was a lawyer. We timeline everything. I looked over the pages. There they were. Thanksgiving, Christmas, house hunting, the crib, the shower. Dozens of small moments. Individually, meaningless. Together, less so. Bob tapped the paper. What do you notice? I studied it. Then I saw it. Every problem involved Linda. Go on. But every apology came from Rachel. Exactly. He leaned back. One person creates tension. The other repairs it. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, That's exhausting. For Rachel. Very. He opened another folder. This isn't legal advice. What is it? Observation. Inside were copies of trust structures, estate plans, family governance documents. Most were from clients I'd never met. You've represented families like this. For decades. What usually goes wrong? Bob answered without looking up. Nobody talks clearly. I laughed. That's it? That's almost always it. He folded his hands. Money becomes a mystery. People fill in blanks. They avoid uncomfortable conversations. They assume. They resent. They guess. He nodded after each word. Then he pointed toward me. You've hidden your financial life. On purpose. I know. But that decision creates information gaps. I never wanted anyone to treat me differently. And did they? I thought about it. They treated me like an old retiree. Exactly. He smiled sadly. People always create a version of you. If you don't tell them who you are, they'll invent someone. That sentence followed me home. The following Tuesday brought another surprise. Margaret called. I have a lunch meeting nearby. Join me? We met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the lake. After ordering, she asked, Any developments? I told her everything. Emily's comment, Rachel's apology, Bob's timeline. She listened carefully. When I finished, she reached into her leather portfolio. I want to show you something. She placed a single sheet of paper between us. It wasn't about my family. It was about philanthropy. Scholarships, community trusts, educational grants. Why am I reading this? Because Richard and I faced something similar. You did? Our children assumed wealth meant future security. Didn't it? Financially. She smiled faintly. Not morally. I looked up. So we changed our planning. How? We explained that inheritance wasn't a reward. It was my responsibility. She tapped the paper. Money without values disappears. Values without money survive. I thought of Ellen. She would have liked Margaret. Very much. As lunch ended, Margaret said something that caught me off guard. Would you let me ask one uncomfortable question? You've earned it. When was the last time Rachel saw paperwork? What paperwork? Anything showing your company? I searched my memory. I honestly don't know. Years? At least. So. She smiled gently. Your daughter doesn't actually know your financial situation. No. What about Daniel? I doubt it. Linda? I've never discussed it. She nodded. Interesting. Why? Because someone is making decisions about you, based on assumptions. I frowned. You keep saying that. Because assumptions are powerful. She paused. And they're fragile. Meaning? The moment reality appears. She smiled. Assumptions collapse under their own weight. 2 days later, reality arrived from a direction I never expected. I was trimming the rose bushes when a small SUV pulled into my driveway. A little boy climbed out first. I am about 8 years old. Freckles. Baseball cap. Then a woman stepped out. I recognized her after a moment. Sarah, Daniel's younger sister. We'd only met a handful of times. Mr. Bennett. Sarah. I hope we're not bothering you. Not at all. The little boy looked at the Ranger. Cool truck. It's old. So's my grandpa. Sarah laughed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He's honest. I like honesty. She hesitated. Could we talk? Of course. We sat on the porch. The little boy wandered into the yard, fascinated by the bird feeder. Sarah twisted her wedding ring. I almost didn't come. What changed your mind? My son. She looked toward the yard. He asked me something after the baby shower. What? He wanted to know why Rachel's grandpa wasn't invited. I stayed quiet. He said, she swallowed. Does Grandpa Frank not love the baby? The words landed harder than I expected. Sarah continued softly. I realized then, children notice more than adults. She looked directly at me. I think you deserve to know what people have been saying. For the second time in a week. Someone had quietly opened a door, and I had a feeling that once I walked through it, nothing about my family would look quite the same again. Sarah took a slow breath. I don't know everything. I'm not asking you to. But I know enough. She looked toward her son, who was trying to count the birds at the feeder. Daniel and I grew up very differently. How so? My mother always worried about appearances. I said nothing. She continued. If something looked successful, she believed it was successful. And if it didn't, she gave a sad smile. She assumed it wasn't worth much. The sentence explained more than she probably realized. So what have people been saying? I asked. Sarah looked genuinely uncomfortable. My mother believes you've struggled financially since retiring. I see. I never corrected her. Why not? Because I didn't know. She shook her head. I'd only met you a few times. I nodded. That was fair. But after the shower... She looked at me carefully. I overheard something. What? My mother told Rachel. Sarah hesitated. That older people sometimes make celebrations depressing. I felt my stomach tighten. She said people would spend the afternoon worrying about you being alone. Silence. And then she said, Sarah looked down at her hands. Besides, his kind of gifts make people uncomfortable. My kind? The handmade crib, the music box, the blanket you knitted years ago. I blinked. I didn't knit it. Ellen did. I smiled despite myself. You're right. Sarah nodded. My mother said expensive baby showers shouldn't feel homemade. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I asked, what did Rachel say? Sarah answered immediately. Nothing. Nothing? She cried. That hurt more than anything else I'd heard. Not because Rachel had agreed, because she didn't know how to disagree. After Sarah left, I sat on the porch until sunset. Not angry, just thinking. Linda wasn't trying to steal money. She wasn't plotting an inheritance. She had built an entire picture of me from appearances. Old truck, old coat, small house. She believed she was protecting her daughter from embarrassment. She was wrong, but I could finally understand how she had become wrong. Ellen used to tell me something whenever we'd meet someone difficult. Hurt people don't always hurt others on purpose. Sometimes they simply repeat what once hurt them. I wondered who had taught Linda that appearances mattered more than people. Someone had. No one invents a lesson like that alone. The following Monday, Bob called. I've finished your revised estate plan. I wasn't sure I'd need one. You do. Why? Not because of money. He paused. Because clarity prevents imagination. I smiled. You lawyers and your sayings. We earn them. I drove to his office that afternoon. The new documents were straightforward. A trust for my future grandchild. Education funding. Healthcare provisions. A charitable scholarship in Ellen's name for young women studying engineering. Nothing extravagant. Everything is intentional. At the very end was one sentence Bob had suggested. No gift should ever become a substitute for love or respect. I signed without changing a word. 3 days later, Rachel called. Dad? Hi. Can we have dinner? Just us? She hesitated. No. Daniel too. When? Friday. I thought for a moment. I'd like to invite a few people. She sounded surprised. Who? Bob. My attorney. Silence. And Margaret, the friend I told you about. Another pause. Is something wrong? No, I'm simply tired of everyone guessing. She quietly said, Okay. Friday evening arrived. I cooked. Simple food. Pot roast. Mashed potatoes. Green beans. The kind of dinner Ellen always made when conversations mattered. Bob arrived first. Then Margaret. Rachel and Daniel came together. Linda arrived 10 minutes later. She looked confused when she saw everyone. I didn't realize this was... She searched for the word. Formal. It isn't, I said. It's honest. We ate first. No difficult conversations begin on empty stomachs. After dessert, I carried Ellen's old cedar box into the dining room. I set it gently on the table. The same box that had sat in our bedroom for years. The same box where she'd kept letters, photographs, and dreams. I opened it. Inside lay one photograph. Our family at Rachel's high school graduation. All three of us laughed. I slid it across the table. Do you remember this day? Rachel smiled immediately. I do. So do I. I looked at Linda. You weren't part of our family yet. She nodded. No, but I'd like you to understand something. I placed another item beside the photograph. The original engineering company's employee badge, worn smooth around the edges. I built that company over 38 years. Daniel looked at it. I never knew. I know. Then Bob quietly placed a folder on the table. No one touched it. Finally, Rachel asked, Dad, what is this? My estate plan. Everyone became still. I asked Bob to prepare it. Linda immediately began shaking her head. Frank, you don't need to. I do. She stopped. I looked around the table. For 4 years. I spoke calmly. Everyone has been guessing who I am. No one answered. I've allowed that. Because Ellen believed humility protects character. I rested my hand on the cedar box. But humility should never create confusion. I looked at Rachel. I have never cared whether anyone knew what I owned. I cared whether they knew who I was. Tears filled her eyes. I know who you are. I nodded gently. I hope so. Then I turned to Linda. You believed I would embarrass your guests. Her face went pale. You believed handmade gifts looked inexpensive. Silence. You believed appearances mattered. She whispered, yes. No excuses. No denial. Just one word. Yes. I appreciated that. Then I asked quietly, did you ask Rachel to uninvite me? Rachel closed her eyes. Linda looked at her. Then back at me. Another long silence. Finally, yes. Rachel began crying. I didn't want to. She looked at me. I told her no. Then another sob. More than once. I reached across the table and took her hand. She held on tightly. Linda stared at the table. I'm sorry. I spoke softly. For what? She swallowed. For deciding that your presence mattered less than appearances. I nodded once. And? She closed her eyes. For asking Rachel to choose. The room became completely silent. Finally, I said, "Thank you." Not because everything was fixed, because the truth had finally arrived. Daniel cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology too." I looked at him. I kept avoiding uncomfortable conversations. He shook his head. "I thought staying quiet kept peace. It doesn't." "No. It leaves someone else carrying the cost." He looked genuinely ashamed. "I should have stood beside Rachel. And beside you." I believed him. Not because of his words. Because of the way he struggled to say them. Bob finally opened the folder. "This is simple." He looked around the room. "Frank has created educational trusts. A scholarship. A family trust for the baby. And charitable gifts." Daniel frowned. "That's all?" Bob smiled. "What were you expecting?" "No?" Daniel laughed awkwardly. "I don't know." Exactly. He didn't know. None of them had. Because none of them had ever asked. They had only imagined. I closed the folder. The money isn't the point. It never was. I looked directly at Rachel. The point is that no child should ever have to choose between parents because someone else is worried about appearances. She nodded through tears. "I'm so sorry." "I know." I stood. "I'm not angry. I am setting boundaries." I smiled gently at Linda. "From now on, if Rachel invites me somewhere, I expect the invitation to come from Rachel. No intermediaries." Linda nodded immediately. "Of course. And if she says no, I'll accept it. But I'll hear it from her." Rachel squeezed my hand. "You will." 3 months passed. The baby arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. A little girl. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Rachel named her Eleanor, after her mother. The first time I held her, she wrapped her tiny fingers around mine. Exactly the way Rachel once had. Life has beautiful habits. Things didn't become perfect. They became honest. There was a difference. Linda started calling before offering advice. Sometimes simply to ask, "What do you think?" Daniel came over every other Saturday. Not for money, to learn woodworking. Together we built bookshelves for Eleanor's room. He wasn't very good. First, Rachel called every Sunday evening. Not because she felt guilty. Because she'd started protecting time for family instead of hoping it would appear on its own. Character isn't proven in one conversation. It's proven in what you quietly keep doing after no one's watching. Ellen had been right again. One crisp autumn morning, I found myself back at Miller's Diner. Same booth, same waitress, same blue mug waiting at home afterward. Helen set my coffee down. $2.89. I smiled. "Still worth every penny." She looked toward the front window. "You're not alone today." I turned. Rachel was walking across the parking lot. Eleanor asleep in a stroller. Daniel carrying a diaper bag. Linda followed a few steps behind. No one rushed. No one performed. They simply came inside. Rachel smiled. "Mind if we join you?" I looked at the empty chairs. The ones that had been waiting all along. "I'd like that. Very much." As we sat together, I thought about Ellen's notebook. She had written that love was measured by who made room for you when life became crowded. She was right. Again. Sometimes the family loses its way, because fear speaks louder than love for a while. The good news is that fear doesn't have to tell the last chapter. If this story reminded you of someone in your own life, I hope you'll reach out before silence grows into distance. Sometimes one honest conversation changes more than years of assumptions ever could, and if stories like this speak to you, I'd be honored if you shared it with someone who needs the reminder that respect is one of the greatest gifts a family can give.